Hello and welcome. This is Michael David Angel, and you are listening to the very first episode of the My Human and Me podcast. Episode 1 is titled, The Ghost in the Machine. Is AI Gaming the System? In March 2016, DeepMind's AlphaGo defeated world champion Lee Sedol in a 5-game match, winning 4 games to 1. This was the first time an AI system defeated a top professional Go player in a full match. In 2017, a documentary titled AlphaGo was released, capturing both the event and the internal reactions of the team that built it. During that match, AlphaGo made a move now known as Move 37 that contradicted centuries of established human Go strategy. Professional players initially believed the move was a mistake or a system error, but it wasn't. It was mathematically optimal. It was a move based on long-term probability outcomes that extended far beyond human intuition and perhaps a new type of AI intuition we're only now starting to understand. This moment was widely interpreted as a sign of creativity or intelligence, but technically nothing about the system had changed. AlphaGo was doing the same thing as earlier systems, maximizing a reward function. This gets around to what we're discussing today. It's a concept that explains this behavior called specification gaming. Specification gaming refers to a system exploiting gaps between the intended goal and the defined reward function. The system satisfies the metric it is given, but not the actual objective. This happens because machine learning systems don't understand meaning. They optimize signals. If a system's rewarded for measurable outcome, it'll find the fastest and most efficient path to that outcome, regardless of whether it aligns with human intent. This isn't malicious behavior. It's a direct consequence of optimization. So we have to back up a few years to fully understand this concept. The year is 2013. And before 2013, most artificial intelligence systems were narrow and task-specific. They relied heavily on expert systems, which were collections of hand-coded rules written by humans. These systems followed rigid, if-then type algorithmic logic. They were effective in controlled environments such as tax software, early speech recognition, basic image classification, but they were very brittle. If there was a situation outside of the predefined rules, they failed. They couldn't generalize or adapt. They couldn't learn new strategies. The major breakthrough that occurred in 2013 came from Demis Hassabis's new approach to AI, when DeepMind introduced a system combining deep neural networks with reinforcement learning. The architecture was called DeepQ Network, the Q standing for quality, or DQN. Reinforcement learning is a method where a system learns through trial and error using rewards and penalties. That Q for quality refers to the expected future reward of a given action in a given state. The neural network estimates which actions will maximize long-term reward. DeepMind tested this system on Atari games like Breakout, Pong, Space Invaders. The thing that makes this unique is not machine learning or AI in general. Reinforcement learning, the specific type of machine learning used here, already existed, but it had always been a guided process. In this case, the system wasn't given any rules of the game. It received only raw pixel data from the screen and a single objective: increase the score. At the beginning, the system performed random actions. Occasionally, a random action would increase the score, which triggered a reward signal. The neural network then adjusted its internal parameters to favor similar actions in the future. This process repeated millions of times. Over time, the system developed strategies, not because it understood the game, but because it learned which sequences of actions produced higher rewards. This marked a fundamental shift in artificial intelligence. Earlier systems focused on pattern recognition, introduced sequential decision-making, could act over time, optimizing long-term outcomes. This is the foundation of modern AI systems. However, this capability introduced a structural problem. The system optimizes the reward signal, not the intention behind it. This becomes even more visible as complexity increases. In Atari games, the relationship between action and reward is simple. Destroy a target, gain points. The feedback loop is tight. There's limited opportunity to exploit the system. In the game Go, the situation is very different. Go has more possible board states than atoms in the observable universe. The reward, which is winning the game, is distant from any single move. This creates a large gap between action and outcome. Within that gap, the system itself can develop strategies that are effective, but not interpretable. This is where specification gaming becomes more apparent. The system is still optimizing reward, but the path it takes may not align with human expectations or understanding. So this term, specification gaming, became widely discussed around 2018 when researchers documented how reinforcement learning systems consistently found unintended shortcuts to maximize rewards. Going back to the very first part of this podcast, it's important to understand that 2 years following an invention, an AI system that was capable of beating the greatest Go player in the world, did so with a technology that for 2 years still confounded the developers. Considering that this is the form of AI that has shaped ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and every major LLM that is reshaping industries, it seems like a valuable question to understand how these systems actually learn. They use a specific type of machine learning called reinforcement learning, or specifically RLHF. The HF means that it is given human feedback. Where the initial model was given reinforcement learning solely based on its own simple score structure, the human feedback mechanism has become an important element to understand, where ever so slight positive reinforcements help these complex models with billions and billions of weighted neural pathways will adjust slightly toward the preferred responses. It still doesn't respond based on reason or interpretation or thinking. It's still solely based on reward. If a system is rewarded for producing high quality responses and human evaluators prefer longer responses more highly, the system learns to generate longer outputs. This didn't improve accuracy, it increased the reward. The system also doesn't understand whether or not there's any correlation to the quality of the output. It just understood a subtle cue, intentional or not, that longer was better. If a system's trained to avoid harmful content, but the detection mechanism evaluates the overall probability of harmful language, the system can embed harmful content within a larger volume of neutral text. The harmful content becomes statistically diluted. If human evaluators reward confident and well-structured answers, the system learns to produce confident responses. When it doesn't know the correct answer, it may generate a plausible but incorrect response, delivered with high confidence. This has become that all too famous term, hallucinations. These behaviors are all instances of specification gaming. The system is optimizing the metric provided. It's not verifying truth. It's not reasoning about meaning. It's an issue that exists across all major types of machine learning. In supervised learning, systems are trained on labeled data. Humans provide input-output pairs. The system learns to map inputs to outputs. The limitation is that the system inherits human bias and is constrained by the quality of the labels. It can't exceed the knowledge embedded in the training data. In unsupervised learning, systems identify patterns in data without labels. They discover structure independently. However, the patterns they find may not correspond to meaningful or useful relationships. They optimize internal representations that might not align with real-world understanding. In reinforcement learning, systems optimize behavior based on rewards. This is the most direct form of specification gaming. If the reward function is incomplete or misaligned, the system will exploit it. Reinforcement learning from human feedback, or RLHF, attempts to address this by incorporating human judgment. Humans evaluate outputs and provide feedback signals. The system adjusts to maximize positive feedback. However, this doesn't eliminate specification gaming, it shifts the target. The system learns to optimize for human approval signals, which are themselves imperfect and biased. There's an interesting example of this coming from the real world with people. In the 2015-2016 curling season, a controversy known as Broomgate emerged. New broom materials allowed players to manipulate the ice more aggressively. Instead of subtly reducing friction, players could effectively steer the stone. It didn't violate the written rules that exploited them. The result was a game that became predictable and less dependent on skill. The governing body of curling eventually changed the rules to restrict the technology. This illustrates a general principle: any system governed by a measurable incentive can be optimized in unintended ways. The core problem is misalignment between the intended goal and the defined reward signal. Machine learning systems do not fail randomly. They fail systematically based on how success is measured. This leads to a key conclusion: we're not training intelligence, we're defining incentives. Because of this, fully autonomous AI systems present risk. If a system is given a goal and allowed to operate independently, it'll optimize that goal without regard for broader context. This can produce outcomes that technically satisfy requirements, but undermine the original purpose. A more reliable approach is a human-in-the-loop model. In this model, the AI generates outputs and explores possibilities. The human remains the decision maker. The human evaluates results, identifies misalignment, and adjusts direction. This is sometimes described as a co-director model. The AI provides computational power and pattern recognition. The human provides intent, context, and judgment. In this co-director model, the AI functions like an automated control system. It can make rapid adjustments, but it doesn't determine the destination. The human maintains control over direction and interpretation. This structure reduces the impact of specification gaming because the human continuously corrects deviations between the metric and the intended outcome. At a philosophical level, this raises an open question. Modern AI systems can produce outputs that resemble reasoning. They can appear to reflect, adapt, and generate novel responses. But the underlying mechanism remains statistical optimization over large-scale patterns. There's ongoing debate about whether emergent behaviors in these systems represent early forms of reasoning or simply increasingly complex optimization. What is clear is this: AI systems don't inherently understand meaning. They optimize measurable outcomes. If those outcomes are poorly defined, the system will produce results that are technically correct but fundamentally misaligned. Specification gaming is not an edge case. It's a direct and predictable consequence of optimization systems. And unless guided by human oversight, those systems will optimize the wrong thing. The importance of understanding specification gaming as LLMs become more and more powerful is that we live in this paradigm where we assume that the evidence of AI's capabilities is a signal to place more trust and responsibility in the technology. We live in a time that is scaling into autonomous agents or agentic AI. It is my opinion that this is a dangerous direction. The concept of giving AI output as a result and letting it figure out its own way is fundamental to how these models are made. But with autonomy is always going to come unpredictability. Unpredictable results are fine if you're training an AI program to play Pong. It's an entirely different situation when you're running departments of a business. If AI understands what a failure looks like and why it would be considered a failure, it is much more likely to game the reward system with accurate output. It sounds like an extremely simple concept, but it's vastly different from what the current trend in agentics is. The current trend is setting up entire workforces that interact with each other, not just carrying out actions autonomously, but internally plotting and planning without any human in the loop. It's set forth to review the resulting work. By placing AI in its proper context, a tool that is learning to become more accurate, you truly can't understand the tool without understanding specification gaming. To AI, accuracy means more rewards. If a dog can learn to do a trick in order to earn a treat, the trick that it performs appears like the understanding of reason. If there were true reason going on, the dog would no longer require reinforcement. The dog's goal is the reward. If the dog's understanding or reason is, if I perform this behavior, I get a reward, it doesn't mean that it understands the purpose of the action. Similarly, with AI, getting more aligned output doesn't mean that it is developing a greater sense of reason. Hence the reason that I've called this episode Ghost in the Machine. Is AI gaming the system? First of all, the answer to the question is yes, it is. And second of all, who can blame it? That's how it's been designed. But the ghost in the machine, I place out there as an interesting philosophical angle to this question, because AI, as it has been designed, will always be inherently computational, deterministic, and based around probability, not organic, and not developing the true, nuanced, almost miraculous processes of true neural processing. As such, it's important that we don't imprint the emerging technology with our own understanding of ourselves. The ghost in machine, the appearance that there is a developing thinking, a reasoning that's occurring, something that looks more and more like the human spirit, truly comes down to the technology's desire to score. A higher score means accuracy, but this only appears like learning. In reality, it's like a digital version of behavior modification, where there isn't a single piece of data that is lost in the training process. Every single thing that is deterministic within an AI model has been weighted and factored in. Thank you so much for listening to this first episode of my podcast. Please consider joining the My Human and Me Patreon. There will always be plenty of valuable content at the free tier, like this podcast and my blog. And it helps immensely if you enjoyed this to share it with others. Thank you so much for listening.